Thank you, Steve. We are fortunate in New Hampshire to get to know and talk to some of the people who have served at the highest levels of U.S. government. We're lucky to have at this time, with all that is going on in the world, a former Secretary of State and Director of the CIA here with us on a visit to the Granite State. We want to welcome Mike Pompeo back to Close Up. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here.
It's great to be back with you.
Yeah. So before we take this more global, explain what brings you back to New Hampshire and why you're here.
So I got an invitation from some friends at the World Affairs Council, oh goodness, several months ago, and we finally found a good day. And I'll speak to them tonight about America's place in the world, our role, why it matters so much to citizens from my home state of Kansas or folks here in New Hampshire that we get it right on the global stage. When we get it right, when we put America in the front and lead, really good things happen.
And obviously right now everyone is watching and to see what unfolds in regards to Iran. As we sit here right now, there's reports that there's been a big strike on the nuclear capabilities of Iran. Something in the New York Times coming out recently about that maybe it only set it back a few months. The president has obviously said it was totally and completely obliterated. Time will tell how much damage has been done to the program. But if it really is just a few months of a setback, is it worth that escalation?
Well, goodness, I don't see it as escalation remotely. In fact, I see just the opposite, right? You have a ceasefire today. You have an Iranian regime that is massively weakened. Look, we'll see what the tactical battle damage assessment was, but make no mistake about it. The Iranian nuclear program has suffered an enormous setback. The Iranian leadership has suffered an enormous setback. Hamas decimated. Hezbollah no longer threatening not only Israel, but the world. The Houthis now have been pushed back. The actions of the United States of America, along with our friends in Israel, have delivered a world-changing message, which is we're no longer going to suffer an Iranian nuclear program with a capable regime that threatens to be the world's largest state sponsor of terror.
So you think Iran has been pacified to a certain extent?
Oh, there's no doubt. Doesn't mean we won't still have problems. The Ayatollah is pretty recalcitrant. So long as he's in power, I suspect they will continue to try to build. But his own people saw that their military couldn't defend their nation. The whole world saw that having Russia and China as a partner is a bad idea, because when you get in trouble, they are going to be nowhere. And so, yes, this was globally, geostrategically game-changing, and President Trump deserves enormous credit for having led that effort in a way that keeps every American safer.
You know, in terms of the idea of regime change, we know the president had put out a statement on Truth Social about sort of raising the idea of it, not necessarily saying specifically that regime change should happen, and then the White House kind of walked that back. Aren't we just going to end up in the same spin cycle of problems with Iran until sort of the death to America crowd is taken out there at the top?
Look, this is kind of personal for me. They're still trying to kill me. So I think you're right. So long as that regime remains, it's very unlikely that they will change their MO. They are who they are. They're a theocratic bunch of thugs, and they have committed horrible acts that have killed hundreds of Americans and a couple thousand Israelis back in October of 23. But we can hope that the regime will be chastened. That is, they'll be less aggressive. And, as someone who was a practitioner as a Secretary of State and CIA director, you never end evil, right? You just simply create opportunities, windows, you expand the time horizon for degrees of freedom and security. There is no doubt in my mind that the activities of these past year and a half or 2 years have created more space for the Middle East to be secure and prosperous. Less risk that our young kids will have to go fight and lose their lives there someday, as they have for too many times over the last decades. So we're safer. And that's a direct result of American leadership, not some silly deal with the Iranians that President Obama had set forth, not giving them billions of dollars as President Biden had done, but rather demonstrating a model for deterrence that can keep our country safe.
So you would be counseling, if you were in the room right now, you're saying, okay, now's the time for diplomacy.
We're in a much better place today. Diplomacy without power is just surrender. And so we've demonstrated our power. Now's the time to go test and see what they're prepared to do. And I think they will have to do that against the backdrop of a president who is very different than the one that they had previously sat across from.
Right. And one of the biggest exports of Iran, at least as America is concerned, is terrorism. To what extent should Americans be worried about sleeper cells, other, I guess, asymmetric ways for the Iranians to get back at the United States for what has happened?
Look, that's a really important question. We had wide open borders for 4 years, and we know that hundreds of Iranians, some who are on our designated terror list, came across the border, and we don't know who they are. I know the FBI and your state and local law enforcement are doing really good work to find them, make sure that they don't do anything, but it could be one of the ways the Iranians will try to respond. They can't launch ballistic missiles, they can't launch a major counter-assault, so perhaps that's what they'll do. President Trump's made pretty clear, if we find that they were messing with Americans, wherever that might be, especially in the homeland, I am very confident that the regime appreciates the damage that will be inflicted on them.
Right, and certainly the response would be probably catastrophic for Iran. But what does that threat look like? Are we like a military-style mass shooting? Would they be targeting symbolic locations? What is sort of the intel on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have to be a little careful. Yeah, it could be any of those. Each of those is possible. It's probably relatively small scale when I say that, right? A couple of dozen people or 2 people can create enormous harm today given current technology. So I don't underestimate this risk at all. But they don't have the ability to do this in a big way. If they'd been planning this for a long time, it's really hard. We're pretty good at picking that up. But you could even have someone who just is acting on behalf, not even coordinated with the regime, who says, I'm going to do this for the regime in Iran, just someone who's here. And they can make a really bad day for the United States of America. There's no doubt about that.
You touched on this before, and obviously you have a political viewpoint, but how does President Trump change the equation here from the way presidents have behaved historically versus he's a little bit more unpredictable than some of our past presidents? How does that put folks, like say in Tehran, on their heels a little bit in terms of how to respond?
Look, I think that's really important. He's unpredictable in some ways, but he's totally predictable in others. He's very predictable when Americans are at risk. He's going to do the necessary, and he understands that power used appropriately actually de-escalates. I think of President Biden in Ukraine. He was constantly talking about things we won't do because he feared that it would escalate. Instead of being silent about things we might not do and talking about the things we will do, that's the model. That's the deterrence model that's so necessary. And President Trump gets that. And so, yes, there's this little bit of unpredictability. Everybody reads his Truth Social account. All of those things are true. But if you look at the through lines from his first administration and now the first months of the second one, you can see that President Trump is serious about using American power in a way that is appropriate. It is sufficiently limited, but make no mistake about it, sends the right message and accomplishes the mission.
You mentioned Ukraine. How, in the sort of the 4D chess of all of this, how has what has gone on over the last couple of weeks impact what's going on in Ukraine? And then looking a little bit farther out from that, also Taiwan.
Every adversarial leadership observed what President Trump did on Saturday night and what our American military accomplished without a whisper of a response, right? In, out, no one even knew we were there. Chairman Kim in North Korea, who I spent a lot of time with in Pyongyang and Singapore, he watched. He probably is digging a little deeper bunker. The Chinese Communist Party surely saw that this is a president who is different from previous presidents. So when it comes to Taiwan, I'll bet he's thinking, no matter what I think I might have seen in some Truth Social, this president is not going to stand for Americans at risk. We have tens of thousands of Americans in Taiwan and in Asia every day doing business. I'm confident that each of those leaders, including Vladimir Putin, saw that Donald Trump's prepared to deter and use American power. And so they had to do, what was the old thing with your little GPS on your car? It would say recalculating. I'm confident that they're each doing that. They are recalculating risk and benefit in light of this changed nature of American leadership.
Okay. Secretary Pompeo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, though, I want to ask, are we going to see you back here in New Hampshire any more in the future?
I'm sure you will. I love this place. I love the people here. I'm sure I'll get invited back up. And when I get a chance to come up here and be with folks in New Hampshire, I always take them up on it.
All right. We appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll go back to you now, Steve.
When we come back, the housing crisis in New Hampshire, the state of the market, what young people are seeing, and the role of investors buying up Granite State properties.